That definitely moves us. And you know why? It's because I believe deep down we all resonate with love. We all want that deep love for someone. We were all created with that in mind. But we also all know that relationships are very complicated. And a lot of us, we've made some bad decisions in our relationships, and sometimes we don't know how to fix something that isn't working or how to make something better that isn't that great. You know, there's some people that believe that there's just one person out there who will complete them and make everything about life just a little bit better and more tolerable. But what happens when we start on that journey and then we find ourselves in a place we never wanted, in a place we never thought of, in a place we never dreamt about or even were hoping for? Like, what happens when your marriage seems like it's barely hanging on? Or you're just kind of worlds apart? What happens when there's no relationship between you and your spouse? The kids are out, there's not a lot of sex happening, and all you do is really argue. What happens when your marriage seems to be in the ER, but no one's coming around to give you some life support? Okay, let me ask the ladies a question here, okay? How many of you, when you were younger, you dreamed of having the perfect wedding? An amazing day, gorgeous dress, having your husband carry you over the threshold of your newfound home, loving you and rubbing your feet every night, right? How many ladies actually dreamt about something like that? Now, men, any of you dream of that? Probably not, right? Most of you were dreaming about the day you get married, and you were thinking about the wedding night. And you were also dreamed of getting married so you could have sex every day and 3 times on weekends, right? And the question that I still have for men here is, how many of you are still dreaming on that one, right? You see, everyone has expectations about marriage. What is it going to be? What's it going to look like? And when marriage doesn't meet those expectations, there's all sorts of letdowns, there's hurt, there's pain, there's anger. And that's actually why I want to talk about this in our last segment in our series of Relationship Rehab. And I want to throw this out there. Today is for anyone who wants to find that significant other in your life, or for those who thought they found them and they're now on the other side of divorce or even spousal loss and thinking, once again, how can I go at something like this? And for those who are in a marriage relationship and trying to make it work. You know, the stats in Canada tell us that around 38% of first-time marriages end in divorce. And the truth is, we all dream of growing old together with someone, with our best friend when we're aged. But what we don't necessarily realize is that doesn't just happen. In Genesis, it's the first book of the Bible, God actually spoke these words, and they make a lot of sense to me, and I would fully agree on them. He says this: it's not good for man to be alone. I think the reality is every single one of us would agree on those words, but we've also messed up because we think a lot of times we know better when it comes to forming our own path to marriage. And so we try these things and a lot of things outside of God's pattern, outside of the structure God said that is going to be the best way into and for marriage. It's kind of why today we feel that it makes sense to cohabitate before marriage. Kind of like, well, I need to test the waters before I make this commitment, right? Now, in any time in the history of the world, it hasn't been normative to have a culture of hookup, shack up, and break up, of living together and sleeping together before marriage other than now. And in fact, the sociological data says that cohabitation actually increases the rates of divorce. So it's kind of ironic, right? You live together to reduce that option, but studies show that it increases the odds 33% higher than those that don't live together. You see, relationship was God's idea and something he intended for our lives. Jesus actually said it this way. He said, at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. See, marriage is instituted by God, and if it's a good thing for us, we know it is because he instituted it, but like all good things, we don't necessarily know how to go about it all that well. And so understand this, the overall goal of marriage is not to make both parties in the marriage like one of the parties. It's actually to make one new unit out of the two. It's discovering how to blend one flesh out of two different people. And this takes years. It requires practice. It requires patience and lots of hard work. You know, when I got married to Marla back in 1999, I remember saying my vows to her, and I said, I, Phil, take you, Marla, to be my wife, to have and to hold. And what's the next line? From this day forward. And that line is really great because it instills hope. I mean, it doesn't matter what has happened in the past. It doesn't matter how many dating relationships I messed up. Before God, I am making this commitment, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, to have and to hold from this day forward. You know, prior to my role here as lead pastor, I pastored our young adult community. It's called The Project here on Sunday nights for 8 years. And every year I did a series on dating and relationships, primarily because that's the hotbed of where people are trying to figure this out in their life many times. And I would consistently say this: if you want to meet the right person, you have to become the right person. Who you become determines everything. So the question you should be asking here today if you're wanting to get married is this: am I the person that I'm looking for? And if you're married, ask this question: am I the person who married me was hoping for? Because we can't change another person, but we can change ourselves. And that is what is so crucial in marriage, recognizing all the areas where we need to grow. So what I want to do this morning is give you some ways to enhance and make your marriage better, to change yourself, to give your marriage some rehab. And I'm going to put out 5 priorities here for you. And the first one is this: prioritize God. I know what you're saying. Dude, you're a pastor. You have to say that, right? Okay, maybe, but on the other side, I know from experience in life, I need to say this. When God is your one and your spouse is your two, things align better. We find our self-worth, we find our self-image, our contentment, our fulfillment in who God says we are, not in who our spouse says we are. Which then helps us in being the person needed for a relationship with someone else. You know, when Jesus was asked, what's the most important thing in life? He didn't say, love your spouse with all you got, right? He said, love the Lord your God first. Why? Because everything else in our lives flows from there. And if you're here this morning, and if you're still waiting for a spouse, in fact, you know, I want to say something to you specifically. If you're here, just kind of wave at me, raise your hand, say, I'm still waiting for a spouse. That's me here this morning. Okay, for those with hands raised, look around. That's your pool, okay? You can thank me later, but just thank me on that, all right? That's great. But what I want to say to you is this, okay? Prioritize God. Put him first in all things, and as you do this, then prep for your two, because you attract who you are. Shaunti Feldman, she wrote a book called Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages. And she discovered that 57% of very happy couples say God is at the center of their marriage. She also discovered that 30% of struggling couples disagree with the same statement. And so I want to give all married couples a challenge in seeking God together. And this obviously only works if your spouse is on the same page. But I want to give you this challenge, and I've said this in years past here already, and I just want to reiterate it again. Pray together. That's it. And the beauty of that is you can make it a take-home project that starts today. You see, whenever I counsel Christian couples and they're going through a rough time, one of the questions I ask them is, hey, do you guys pray together? And you know what I hear consistently? No, we don't. Prayer is intimate. It's bonding. When you join hands with your spouse and when you petition God over something, it draws your hearts together and sets the foundation for a solid marriage. You know, Family Life a number of years ago did a survey, and they discovered that in Christian couples, only 8% of Christian couples pray together regularly. But for those that do, fewer than 1% end in divorce. You know what I'd love? I'd love those 8% to be all people who attend Hope City Church. Couples, pray together. So you want some rehab in your marriage? The first thing is this: prioritize God. Second thing is this: prioritize communication. Most couples veer into the ditch with their relationship when they stop effectively communicating with each other. Let me talk to the guys here for a sec. How many times have you met up with your wife after work and your wife is like, "How was your day?" And you're like, "Good." And she's like, "So what happened?" You're like, "Nothing." And she's like, "How was your lunch?" And you're like, "Good." "How was the presentation?" "Great." And then she storms off and you're like, "What's going on here? I thought I was communicating," right? When communication breaks down in a marriage, we leave room for suppositions, and what suppositions do is that they distort the truth. Listen, when there is room left for doubt, trust will erode, and trust is one of the biggest bedrocks in a healthy marriage. That is when couples actually start to disagree a lot, or they fight. Now, the truth is, all couples fight. Maybe you're here this morning and you had an argument already on the way to church, and usually guys can shake it off a little bit more, so maybe as a guy you're trying to put your arm around your spouse right now, you're like, this ain't happening, it's not over yet, right? All couples fight, but healthy couples fight clean. Unhealthy couples fight dirty. Healthy couples work towards resolution. Unhealthy couples press for the win. I like what Proverbs says. Proverbs is an Old Testament wisdom book. It says, "A quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day." And I'm like, that's pretty funny, isn't it? And what he's saying is that a quarrelsome wife is annoying. She's hard to live with. But check this out. It's better to have a rash than to live with a husband who is a jerk as well. And that's 2 Phil Kniesel 2, verse 8. It's also annoying. You know what I'm saying? And I like what Wisdom James gives us in his book. He says it this way: everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That is great couple advice. Listen carefully. So when your spouse is talking to you, you put the phone down. You give her the full attention. And then he says, guard your words carefully. Be slow to speak. And words, Proverbs tells us, have the power of life and death. So what you say actually makes a difference. And this is where we need to put a mental filter in place. And I got 2 questions that you can use as a mental filter. Number 1, should it be said? And number 2, should it be said now? Like, how many times have you and I said something in an argument only to say, "Oh man, I wish I didn't say that." Or, "Oh, I know by what I just landed in my words right now, I made things worse." So be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I mean, that's great advice for any relationship in our life. It's really great for our relationship with our spouses. And one thing that I strongly encourage all of you married couples, after any disagreement that you may have, and especially after you say something you didn't really want to say, is yes, land the words to your spouse, say, "I'm sorry, but I want to add 3 more words to that. I think these 3 words are critical and crucial, and they are this: I'm sorry, please forgive me." Sorry admits the wrong, forgiveness releases the wrong. And granting forgiveness on the other party truly lets the offense go. And when we ask for forgiveness, we humble ourselves. And the truth is, that is always a good thing. So friends, prioritize communication. Like, when was the last time you just told your spouse how much they mean to you and why? When was the last time you told them exactly why you are so in love with them? What you value about them? What makes you so attracted to them? Communicate this, and trust me, it'll change your relationship. Why? Because words bring life. They give life. You speak this way to and about your spouse, and you're going to give them life. You give life to yourself, and then you give life to your relationship. So in a marriage, you prioritize God, you prioritize communication, and thirdly, you prioritize fun. I've heard it said that a man doesn't know what happiness is until marriage, but then it's too late. Now that's a cultural lie. That is something completely false. I mean, Justin Bieber, he just Instagrammed about his wedding with Haley this past week, and he said these words: "No more love that we're married. That's what happens." And he said it in a joking way. Listen to these wisdom words from the Bible. Enjoy life with your wife whom you love. Enjoy life. Relish life. Take it in. Have a smile on your face. Be in a good mood. Have fun. And this includes dates. This includes doing things that each of you enjoy. This includes romance. And yes, this even includes sex. Think about this. No one falls in love being bored. No one has a bad time falling in love. So prioritize fun. It's not a luxury in a marriage. It's essential. Spend time or spend energy making time for each other and make it a priority. Carve out time to do things that each of you enjoy, whether it's working out, whether it's shopping, whether it's going for dates or going for coffee. Just enter the world of your spouse and do something that you know they love. And here's something maybe for you as a woman that you need to know. Most men are likely to open up during or right after he's done something with you that he enjoys. So ladies, your man doesn't talk, do something he likes and see if that changes things. So I want to move on here because prioritizing fun, there's another thing that goes along with this, and this is my fourth point here this morning, that is prioritize intimacy. Sex is a big deal in a marriage. I've met men who say sex has become so limited in their marriage that it's really difficult for them. And God's designed sex to be enjoyed within the confines of a marriage relationship. And the truth is, the best sex you will experience is monogamous sex with your spouse. And a marriage without sex is actually just reduced to a business relationship. And the Bible, again, has a lot to say about this. Back in Proverbs, we read these words. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. You know what that's saying? When you were younger, it was easy to be sexual. But with age, don't lose this aspect in your marriage. And it goes on. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Friends, that's pretty sexual if you ask me. And it's making the point, don't lose out on the intimacy in your marriage. It's critical. It's not just for a period of time. It's for your lifetime together. Listen to these words. May she satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her. Meaning this is an ongoing thing. This is something that steals your affections, your desires, your longings for your entire marriage. Why? Because when your affections are focused on each other and for each other, and when you're mutually coming together and experiencing the oneness, you actually ward off many of the temptations that come into our lives that try to kill, steal, and destroy our marriages. You know, the truth is, most guys I talk to desire more sex. Most women don't realize how big of a deal it is for their guy. And the truth is, the guys don't really know how to talk about it without making it seem selfish and awkward. Let me put it this way. Lack of sex is as emotionally serious to him as sudden silence is to you. And I love Paul, a New Testament writer. He actually addresses this in these words. He says this, do not deprive each other except perhaps by mutual consent. And what he's saying is, do not deprive each other of the sexual intimacy in a marriage, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So he's making a very real case here that intimacy is something that helps us remain free from temptations that could actually steer us otherwise. It's the temptation to find the outlet in porn because your marriage isn't happening. It's the temptation to flirt with that guy because your man is so emotionally absent. Listen to what Paul says. Come together again. Meaning get back to true sexual intimacy that you had as a couple. Make it a priority. So married couples, if sex has become non-existent or infrequent in your marriage, I have another take-home project for you this morning, okay? I remember hearing this once, and let it ring true for your marriage. If you want what you once had, do what you once did. And this helps keep purity in your marriage. This helps keep both of you on track. Hebrews, a New Testament book, says it this way. Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed be kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. We live in a world where temptations are more than ever. I mean, the online community has opened us up to a plethora of damaging addictions and ideas that can tear marriages apart. I mean, besides porn, there's online affairs, there's destructive views on sexuality, there's more. And what is happening is this growing sense of entitlement, especially when it comes to the arena of sexuality. And so in prioritizing sex in a marriage, you know what we're doing? We're fighting both for inward and outward purity. Let me explain. Outward purity is our behavior. Paul wrote these words, and they have always arrested me. He said, "But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity." Another place he tells us to flee from sexual immorality. And that's kind of a big deal, right? Those words, not even a hint and flee, indicate that in our actions we need to be set apart. Now, inward purity deals with our hearts. The truth of the matter is, we never have an affair before we think it. We never stray from our spouse by accident. It's something that becomes a reality in our minds before it ever becomes a reality in our actions. Listen to these words from the book of Psalms. How can a young person stay on the path of purity? By living according to your word. I seek you with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. See, we stay pure in heart by staying in God's word, by reading and knowing what the Bible says, and then by living it out. So friends, the challenge is this: get into the Bible. Its words help you fight for purity in your life, both inwardly and outwardly. So for a marriage rehab, you prioritize God, prioritize communication, you prioritize fun, you prioritize intimacy, and the fifth thing I want to land for you this morning is this: prioritize forever. Jesus said this, "Two will become one flesh, and so they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate." Like, the reason divorce feels so terrible is because we're ripping apart something God made one. Marriage is actually a covenant. It's not just a contract. A contractual view is where we actually have this job description for our spouse, and then we call them out when they don't do what we want them to do. But we need to have a covenantal agreement. And Malachi is this book in the Old Testament. He was a prophet, and he actually writes these words. He says, "The Lord is the witness between you and the wife of your youth." Meaning a contract is between two people. A covenant is with three because it includes God. And here's the difference. A contract looks out for what is best for me. A covenant wants what's best for us. A contract is always trying to negotiate terms in my favor. And in a covenant, we serve one another through God's terms. In a contract, we keep record of someone's wrong. In a covenant, we don't keep any records of wrongs. A contract's goal is, I want to win. A covenant's goal is, we want to worship. A contract is getting, a covenant is giving. A contract is based upon mutual distrust, where a covenant is based on mutual trust. It's this commitment that says we're in this for the long haul. And you know what? One of the things I tell couples all the time in pre-marriage counseling is never to use the words separation or divorce in an argument that you may have. Why? Because you're in this for the long haul. You will never give up, and those words are toxic. You know, God's plan for marriage is lifelong. It's why we read this definition of love. It says this: love never gives up. It's always hopeful, and it endures through what? Every circumstance. You know, it's interesting. Years ago, I remember reading this line that said, the best years of marriage come after you've been married for 20 years. And I'm kind of like jacked about that because this summer marked 20 years. And I'm like, yes, if it gets better than this, I'm in for the ride. I'm excited for that. Paul writes this in Philippians. He says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value each other above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." And that change of drive, that attitude in any marriage will be the ticket to lasting love. And you know why we love seeing long-time married couples? Because we all want that. And I want to say this. Maybe you're here today and your marriage fell apart. Maybe things were beyond your control. Things were difficult, and the reality it wasn't that great in a lot of ways. I want you to remember that there is always a next in your life, and that God can take a past that seems broken and make it whole. Do not let your past determine your future, because with God, there is always a next. So, do you need some rehab in your marriage this morning? Prioritize these 5 things, and I guarantee you, sparks will start to fly again. Prioritize God. Prioritize communication. Prioritize fun. Prioritize intimacy. And prioritize forever. I'm going to ask you to stand if you can, please, and I want to close in prayer today. And I want to make this prayer in 2 parts. I'm going to pray for those individuals who are here today who are still looking for that someone in their life, looking for a spouse, looking for an individual. And then I want to pray over married couples here. So let's go to prayer. Jesus, I thank you that the design of forever with someone was from you. I thank you that these internal longings that we have aren't things that, aren't good or right, but they are from you. And so help every single one of us to be able to understand what that means in the context of the Christian life. I pray for that man or woman here today who is looking and searching for that individual. I pray, God, that they may seek you first and see everything else line up in regards to that. I pray that they may find that person who they're looking for, but may they become who they are looking for, and give them the strength, the wisdom, and the guidance to do that. And I want to pray for married couples here. And if you're here with your spouse and they're standing next to you, can I ask you just to grab their hand? And I want to pray over all married couples here. God, I thank you for every marriage that's represented here. And God, we're human, and we recognize that we go through ebbs and flows. We go through valleys and high points in marriages. And Lord, I pray for every single marriage that is here today. I pray that, one, they put you first. I pray that there is a sense of God leading this couple, God being inside this marriage and doing what he needs to do. But Lord, I pray for those things that can kind of act as walls between us, whether it's communication, whether it's intimacy, whether it's other things. I pray that those realities may come down and there might be a growth forward in this relationship. Whether they've been married for 2 years or 44 years, God, I pray just strength, wisdom, guidance, and blessing upon every couple. I pray for passion. I pray for repair if it's needed. I pray for the grace of God, and I pray that they may be examples of what it means to be Christian couples that walk together, that know their God, and move forward in that reality. And so I thank you that we can trust you for that, Lord. And I pray for every individual and every couple and every family represented here. On this Thanksgiving weekend, I pray blessing upon them. I pray a heartfelt life of gratitude. And may we walk forward knowing, God, that we are who we are and we are where we are. We have what we have because of you. And so we thank you for that, Jesus. And I pray this blessing in Christ's name. Amen. If you're here today and you don't know Jesus personally, that's one of the big deals why we do church here every week as well, is we want people to get into a relationship with Jesus and make a decision to follow him, because we believe that following Jesus is the best decision anyone can make, and it dramatically changes your life. And if you're here today and you want to take that next step, can I ask you just to text LIFE to 555-888? We'd love to put a digital booklet in your hand, and it gives you an opportunity to connect with one of our pastors on our team. If you're here this morning and you want prayer in any aspect of your life, or maybe even as a couple, we're going to have some of our pastors available down at the front right. They'd love to pray with you. Friends, thanks for being here today. And spouses, can I give you one Thanksgiving challenge? In the next few days, write your spouse a letter of thanks. And just say, this is why I'm thankful for you. God bless you guys. Have an incredible weekend, and happy Thanksgiving.